So the US Open swing is about to start. We've got Washington starting next week and the Canadian Open being the big 1,000. But some big names have actually pulled out, which is a bit of a surprise who has actually pulled out over the last couple of hours. Let's go see the withdrawal list.
The two biggest names in tennis just pulled out, and now fans, players, and tournament officials are demanding major changes to the ATP calendar. Is the current schedule finally breaking the sport? The stadium lights had barely dimmed on Wimbledon when a new storm began gathering over professional tennis. Just weeks after Jannik Sinner lifted the Wimbledon trophy, defeating Alexander Zverev in the final after a punishing route through the draw that included a semi-final battle against Novak Djokovic himself, the sport's brightest star made a decision that would send shockwaves through the tennis world. He was pulling out of the Canadian Open. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Sinner was the champion. He was the man everyone wanted to see next. The player fans in Montreal had circled on their calendars the moment his name was etched onto that Wimbledon trophy. But instead of walking onto Canadian soil as the reigning champion of the sport's oldest Grand Slam, he announced that his body needed rest. His health, he said, had to come first. And he wasn't alone. Novak Djokovic, the same man Sinner had defeated in that grueling Wimbledon semifinal, also withdrew. Two of the biggest names in tennis gone from the same tournament in the same week. For the organizers in Montreal, it felt like déjà vu, because this wasn't the first time. Both players had withdrawn from the Canadian event the year before too, when it was staged in Toronto. A pattern was forming, and it was one that tournament director Valerie Tetreault could no longer ignore. But the story didn't end there. As if the tennis gods wanted to twist the knife further, Carlos Alcaraz's name was missing from the entry list as well. The young Spaniard, one of the most electrifying players on tour, had been sidelined since April with a wrist injury, and Montreal would be the latest event to feel his absence. Three of the sport's most magnetic superstars, all unavailable for one of the tour's most prestigious tournaments. For fans buying tickets, for broadcasters building their coverage, for a tournament that exists specifically to showcase the very best that tennis has to offer, this was nothing short of a crisis. Tetreault didn't hide her frustration. She said the organizers were disappointed, but she also made it clear she understood why the players had made these choices. She acknowledged that with such a punishing schedule, health had to come first. But then she said something that cut straight to the heart of the issue haunting men's and women's tennis alike. She said the increasing frequency of these last-minute withdrawals pointed to something bigger, something the sport could no longer afford to sweep under the rug. Because here's the truth hiding beneath the headlines. This wasn't really about one tournament in Montreal. This was about a sport pushing its greatest athletes to the very edge of what the human body can endure. Picture the calendar these players are forced to survive. 11 months. Almost no true off-season. Grand Slams stacked against Masters 1000 events, hard courts bleeding into clay, clay bleeding into grass, one time zone after another, one physical toll after another. 7 of the 9 Masters 1000 tournaments now stretch across 12 grueling days instead of the shorter formats of years past. It is a season with almost no room to breathe, and the players are the ones paying the price, match after match, tournament after tournament, year after year. And it isn't just Sinner, Djokovic, and Alcaraz feeling the strain. Just weeks earlier, on the eve of their own home Grand Slam at Wimbledon, British stars Jack Draper and Emma Raducanu were forced to withdraw because of injury. Draper pulled out with a long-term arm problem, and what he said afterward should have stopped everyone in their tracks. He admitted that the sheer number of injuries piling up among the tour's elite players felt deeply troubling. Even Alcaraz himself had sounded the alarm before, warning nearly a year earlier that the schedule was pushing players toward the brink, saying, in his own blunt words, that it was going to break them. So when Tetreault stood before the media in Montreal and said adjustments were needed to protect the integrity of these tournaments while still respecting what players go through physically, she wasn't just talking about ticket sales or television ratings. She was voicing a fear that has been quietly building inside locker rooms, training rooms, and press conferences for years. A fear that the modern tennis calendar might be unsustainable. A fear that the very stars keeping their sport alive are being burned out by the machine that profits from their brilliance. But Montreal wasn't the only battleground. This tension had already exploded on the women's side of the sport just months before. At the Dubai Championships, a WTA 1000 event, both Aryna Sabalenka, the world's top-ranked woman, and Iga Swiatek withdrew only 2 days before the tournament began. It sent the same shockwaves through Dubai that Sinner and Djokovic withdrawals were now sending through Montreal. The response from Dubai's tournament director was fierce. Salah Talak suggested that players making late withdrawals should face point penalties, a punishment designed to discourage exactly this kind of last-minute pullout. But Sabalenka wasn't willing to stay silent. She fired back, calling the criticism aimed at her ridiculous, and she went even further, suggesting she might simply choose not to return to that tournament again. It was a warning shot, a message from the players to the people running the sport. You cannot demand our bodies survive an unforgiving, unrelenting calendar, and then punish us the moment those same bodies break down. And now here we are, watching the exact same conflict resurface in Montreal, this time involving three of the biggest names men's tennis has ever produced. Sinner, Djokovic, Alcaraz, withdrawn, absent, missing from a stage built to showcase them. Tetreault revealed that discussions were already underway with the ATP, an attempt to find real solutions before this crisis spirals even further out of control. But the clock is ticking. The US Open, the final Grand Slam of the year, looms just weeks away, arriving right after Montreal and Cincinnati, back to back to back, with barely any time for these athletes to recover in between. So the question hanging over the sport right now isn't simply whether Sinner or Djokovic will show up in Montreal. It's something far bigger. It's whether the very structure of professional tennis, the demanding, relentless, wall-to-wall calendar that fuels the sport's biggest events, is quietly destroying the players who make it worth watching in the first place. Because if the greatest champions in the game keep vanishing from the biggest stages, one withdrawal at a time, then eventually, fans won't just be losing a tournament appearance here or there. They'll be losing the very stars the sport was built around. And that is a reckoning that tennis may no longer be able to postpone.